The first of its kind wild card series has concluded with all 7 of the Central Division teams in those series eliminated from postseason play by a combined score of 80-44. Left in the field, 4 sets of division rivals battling things out at MLB's neutral site locations for a chance to go on to the league championship. Hello, everyone, and welcome into this Tuesday, October 6th edition of Around the Bases from 110 Sports. Live streaming here on the 110 Sports Network at 110sportsmedia.com/live, as well as twitch.tv/110sports. I'm Chris Brown. Great to have you with us here on this Tuesday. Both ALDS matchups got underway last night with 12 home runs being hit between those two games. In fact, there's been little small ball in the postseason to date, with teams who out-homered their opponents in this 2020 playoffs now 13-0. Meanwhile, on the NL side, 2 division series kick off today, one just about an hour from now. So we've got some wild card series conclusions to discuss, 2 ALDS games in the books, 2 NLDS series beginning, 4 games on the schedule for today and for tomorrow. A lot to talk about here on the show today on this October 6th, so let's go ahead and just dive right in. Here's what you can expect today on the broadcast. We're going to start, it's pretty simple formula for you today. We're going to start with an update on the ALDS series that got underway last night. So we have the Astros and the A's, and the Yankees and the Rays. Both those series got underway last night, so we'll talk about that. We'll get you an update plus my prediction on how the rest of the way for how that's going to play out the rest of the way. We'll go into some news and notes. We have some other non-playoff related or non-playoff related headlines to discuss today. Then we will talk about the NLDS previews and my predictions for the NLDS. We have Marlins Braves and Padres Dodgers. And we'll wrap up today's broadcast with what's on deck, a look at the schedule for today, for tomorrow, and what you can expect coming up in the next couple of days in the baseball world. So let's dive right into our ALDS updates. And we have the Astros and the A's. We're going to start with that series. So we're just going to go through both these series, have a little discussion about how these two teams got here, a refresher about how these two teams got here, a little bit of context going into the matchup, and then we'll discuss, in the case of the American League, last night's game. So the Astros and the A's is being played at Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles. Game 1 yesterday, the Astros winning 10-5, and we'll talk more about the specifics of that game in just a moment. But a couple of reminders for you. First off, the Astros got here by being one of just 2 teams, the Brewers being the other, who qualified for the postseason despite a losing record. They finished short of an AL West title for the first time since 2016, battling injuries to key players like Yordan Alvarez and Justin Verlander, and an underwhelming offense. As we discussed back on Thursday's show, the Astros and Dusty Baker held Minnesota's offense to just 2 total runs in an unexpected wild card series sweep, with a tandem starter approach and a couple key hits being the difference offensively in that upset sweep over Minnesota. And the Twins' postseason losing streak now up to 18 games. That's the longest in major North American sports history, and you just can't help but feel bad for the Twins and their fans given that situation. Meanwhile, we've got the Athletics, and the A's. This was the only wildcard series in the AL to go to 3 games, meaning we did not get to talk about the outcome of A's White Sox on Thursday's show. The A's, who finished on top the AL West for the first time since 2013, barely edged out the White Sox. Lucas Giolito shut down Oakland in Game 1. A's bounced back against Dallas Keuchel in the second game and got a dominant start from Chris Bassett. And then Game 3 was wild. That happened on Thursday. The game featured 17 pitchers, the most ever used in a 9-inning postseason game, and a tie-breaking 2-run single from infielder Chad Pinder, as well as a dominant A's bullpen, powered the team to their first playoff series victory since 2006 and sent the White Sox home. As far as the White Sox, it was a tough series loss for a team that many thought, and me included, could certainly have the ability to make a deep postseason run. And it shouldn't take away from the season that the White Sox had this year. First off, it wasn't a bad series performance anyway. It wasn't a horrible. They didn't get swept. It wasn't embarrassing, and it certainly shouldn't take away from what the rebuilding club has done this year. I mean, they went from rebuilding club to now, like, look, they're here. They're ready to compete. Their emergence to post their first winning record since 2012, reached the postseason for the first time since '08. And they've got an incredible core. The White Sox are going to be a force in the AL for years to come. But the A's survive and advance to take on the Astros here in the ALDS. And the A's won the season series against the Astros 7-3. 7 of those games were decided by just 2 or fewer runs. So a lot of tight contests. But the A's, the better team this season, and they won the season series against Houston. A lot of bad blood, a lot of hostility toward each other. Of course, you'll remember the early season benches clearing incident, which led to the suspension of A's outfielder Ramon Laureano, and Astros hitting coach Alex Cintrone received a hefty suspension for that. The Astros, of course, also have a chip on their shoulder given the fallout and the response and the reaction, the motivation to prove critics wrong with regards to reaction to the Astros sign stealing scandal. So that's sort of the context going into yesterday's game. And here's how it played out. Carlos Correa homered twice. He drove in 4 runs. Jose Altuve hit a go-ahead 2-run single in a 6th inning 2-out rally following an A's error. And George Springer notched 4 hits as the Astros bats came alive in a resounding 10-5 win over Oakland in Game 1 of the ALDS yesterday afternoon. Many key hitters in the Astros lineup, including Altuve and Correa and Bregman, have underperformed expectations and just their normal numbers this season. And the club hit just 194 in their sweep over the Twins. So it was really just a couple of timely hits for the Astros and the pitching that the Twins couldn't hit at all that led them to that AL wildcard series sweep over the Twins. So there were still questions about the offense coming in. But yesterday, the Astros got to Oakland starter Chris Bassett and one of the best bullpens in baseball, tallying 16 total hits, the most that the A's have given up in a game this season. Now, the Athletics actually jumped out to an early lead in this game with home runs in the 2nd and 3rd innings from Chris Davis and Sean Murphy, the catcher, before a 3-run 4th inning from the Astros, in which Correa hit a 2-run shot. And Alex Bregman homered on October 5th for the 4th consecutive season, which is absolutely wild. 4 straight seasons homering on the same date, October 5th. And that tied the game up, and then Matt Olson, A's first baseman, untied it with a solo homer in the 5th inning. And then came the top of the 6th inning, when after 2 quick outs, a Marcus Semien error, the A's shortstop, that opened the door for 4 consecutive Astros hits with 2 outs as the team scored 4 runs in the inning. The Astros scored again in the 7th inning on another Carlos Correa home run, and then again in the 9th inning on a Correa RBI single and Yuli Gurriel's sac fly. The A's, after scoring 5 runs, 4 earned off of Houston starter Lance McCullers, couldn't touch the Astros bullpen the rest of the way. The Astros bullpen holding the A's hitless the rest of that game, as the Astros won it 10-5. Correa finished 3 for 5 with those 2 home runs, 4 RBI. He became the first shortstop in MLB history with multiple postseason games with 2 home runs. So no shortstop in MLB history had had multiple 2-homer games until Carlos Correa, which is pretty crazy. He certainly thrives in October. And George Springer, as mentioned, 4 hits in that game. So the Astros take Game 1. It's certainly not the same type of situation as the wild card series, where taking Game 1, all of a sudden, the team that's down is 1 loss from elimination. There's not that pressure here now that we're in a best-of-5 instead of a best-of-3 series. That being said, the team that takes Game 1 in a best-of-5 series does, of course, have a pretty good advantage. I think the number I saw was somewhere around 72% chance of winning by taking the first game. But it's certainly not over in any sense at all. There's certainly not the same situation as with those wild card series. Couple of takeaways from this game. One is the Astros, or takeaways also could be questions. One is the Astros lineup back. One game is obviously too small of a sample size to say the Astros lineup is back and clicking completely after an extended stretch of generally underperforming this year. But if it is, and look, in the postseason, all you have to do is string, a hot streak together for a little while. Doesn't have to last forever. But if it is, we all know what's there in that Astros lineup, and that there's few better when they're clicking at 100% with Correa, Bregman, Springer, Gurriel, Michael Brantley, etc., etc. That can be one of the best lineups in baseball, based on the production we've seen those players provide in the past. It's just too early to tell, from one game, if they are back, or if we're going to see more struggles moving forward. But that's certainly something to keep an eye on. We know what they're capable of. Another takeaway, the A's bullpen is going to be critical for them, and it let them down in Game 1. A Houston Astros outfielder Josh Reddick over the weekend saying, quote, "If we beat their bullpen, we beat these guys, or those guys." And it's really it's really probably that simple. The bullpen has been the greatest strength of the A's this season. Their 2.72 reliever ERA ranked first in the majors in the regular season. Oftentimes, A's starters don't go particularly deep into games. You combine that with the fact that there's no off days during the division series, and a short hook will probably be given to starting pitchers for bad outings. And the A's are going to need their bullpen to keep coming up big here in this series. That didn't happen in Game 1, as Oakland's relievers gave up 6 runs in 5 innings. Only 3 of those were earned, I should point out, due to the Semien error, which really hurt them, opening up that rally for the Astros. But they're going to need better from their bullpen moving forward, no question about that. Finally, another takeaway, that error was just costly. I mean, it wouldn't be fair or accurate to blame this A's loss solely on Marcus Semien's error. I mean, it's certainly much more than that. But the shortstop's 6th inning error certainly cost the A's, and like I said, opening up that rally for the Astros, or leaving the door open for the Astros to rally. It could have been a 1-2-3 inning had Semien made that play, and maybe things could have turned out differently. And Semien, he's improved defensively in recent years, but he's still committed 7 errors in the 60-game season. He only played in barely over 50 games, so not a great fielding percentage from him this year. And you just can't make mistakes like that, particularly if the Astros offense is going to be functioning at a high level the rest of this series. If it continues to function at a high level, you're not going to be able to afford to give them any extra chances. Because we know the Astros can capitalize on that with the talent that's in that lineup. So those are my takeaways from that series. As for a prediction, I am going to stick with my prediction heading into the series, which I didn't get a chance to talk about here because of the schedule, but my prediction heading into the series was A's to win this, and I'm still going with A's to win this, but of course I don't think you can do it in any less than 5 games at this point. I mean, I have A's in 5 is my pick right now. For the A's to win it in 4, they'd have to win 3 straight. I think that's doubtful. I'm sticking with the A's, certainly not the same level of confidence I would have if they had won last night, obviously, but I'm sticking with A's in 5 because I just am not convinced that, one, the Astros lineup is just back based on that one game. Now, it certainly could be, but I'm not convinced that all of a sudden they're going to keep doing what they did last night, again, moving forward offensively. And 2, I have concerns about the Astros pitching. The bullpen actually did pretty darn well, like we talked about after McCullers, but I just have concerns about the inexperience in that bullpen, Dusty Baker's apparent reluctance to kind of go to the pen early. There's a lot of young starters in that rotation that I do have interest in. I mean, I should say that I do think are really interesting players, but not a lot of proven players in that rotation over a long term in the postseason. So those two things combined, I'm still going to go with the A's to take this series in 5 games. Now, we'll talk about the Game 2 matchup on tap for today coming up in a little bit at the end of the show in What's on Deck. But I want to also talk about the other ALDS matchup that got underway yesterday, and that is the Rays and the Yankees at Petco Park in San Diego. Game 1 last night. The Yankees offense was the story, a 9-3 win for New York over Tampa Bay, and we'll talk more about that game specifically in just a moment. First, a reminder about how these teams got here. The Rays, as we talked about back on Thursday, they're in the postseason for the sixth time since 2008, but they won the AL East for the first time in a decade by posting the league's best record at 40-20 on the year. Tampa Bay, as we talked about, took care of business in a sweep against the Blue Jays with great outings from Blake Snell and Tyler Glasnow, holding the Blue Jays offense to just a couple of runs, and they got some timely hits from outfielders Manuel Margot and Hunter Renfroe. Toronto, as we talked about on Thursday, a young team with a bright future that's just not quite at a high level, at high enough level just yet. The Yankees, we talked about this on Thursday as well. We've talked about all season, rocky middle of the seasons with several injuries. They lineup returned to full strength, nearly full strength down the stretch. They finished second in the AL East standings, I should say, and that star-studded lineup rocked Shane Bieber and then Carlos Carrasco in a 2-game sweep of the Indians. They became the first club in MLB postseason history to score double-digit runs in their first 2 playoff games, and Garrett Cole was outstanding in Game 1 of that series. As for the Indians being eliminated, it's not hard to figure out what happened there. It's not hard to explain. I mean, you don't know how exactly why Shane Bieber faltered, but as far as an explanation for why they're not playing in the ALDS, Shane Bieber couldn't get it done, and Carlos Carrasco struggled in Game 2. The Indians bullpen couldn't pick him up, and that team's not going to outslug the Yankees. And so the Yankees advance, and we have Yankees-Rays here in this second ALDS matchup. Tampa Bay won 8 of the 10 games between these two teams this season, a big factor in them winning the AL East. And there's a lot of hostility between these two teams as well. There's a long-standing rivalry between these clubs, which is certainly going strong this year and figures to reach a whole new level in the postseason, of course. You'll remember we talked about it back probably several weeks ago now, in their final matchup between the Rays and Yankees this season. Aroldis Chapman threw a 100-plus mile-an-hour fastball over the head of a Rays batter. Both Aaron Boone and Kevin Cash were ejected from the series finale the next day. There's certainly Chapman, meanwhile, was suspended. He appealed. No result on that yet. So there's clearly a lot of hostility between these two clubs as well. Plenty of motivation for both of them, undoubtedly. So we head into Game 1 last night. And here's the basics. Garrett Cole grinded out a strong start. The Yankees became the first team in MLB history to score 9-plus runs in each of their first 3 postseason games. They defeated the Rays 9-3 in Game 1 of the ALDS last night. It was a back-and-forth affair early, as the two teams combined to hit 5 home runs in the first 4.5 innings of action last night. It was like the home run derby early. Trailing 3-2 in the top of the 5th, the Yankees got solo home runs from Kyle Higashioka and Aaron Judge to take a lead that they would not relinquish. Aaron Hicks notched an RBI single in the top of the 9th, and then Giancarlo Stanton delivered the exclamation point with a grand slam in the 9th to seal the victory, the first ever grand slam by a Yankees DH in the postseason. With that grand slam, the Yankees became the first AL team ever with grand slams in back-to-back playoff games. And after an incredible Game 1 start in the AL Wildcard Series, as I mentioned a moment ago, Garrett Cole gave up 3 earned runs, 2 home runs from Randy Arozarena and Ji-Man Choi, who has hit Cole incredibly well. Cole gave up 3 earned runs, 2 home runs in his first 4 innings of work, but then he pushed on He got through 6 innings with 8 strikeouts, 3 earned runs before turning things over to a Yankees bullpen that held the Rays scoreless the rest of the way. Blake Snell couldn't match his dominant start from the Toronto series, surrendering 4 earned runs in 5 innings. An interesting bit of history, though, last night for the Rays in the loss. A left-hander, Shane McCallahan, he came on to record the final out of the top of the ninth, became the first pitcher in MLB history to make his debut in the postseason. So that's a big first there for the Rays. But they do fall in Game 1 to the Yankees, 9-3. A couple of takeaways from this game. There really may be no stopping this Yankees offense, number one. As mentioned, they've now scored 9+ in each of their first 3 playoff games this year. First MLB team ever to do that. Their 11 home runs and their 31 runs scored between their first 3 playoff games combined are both also the most in a 3-game span in MLB postseason history. I mean, so we're talking historically incredible offense from the Yankees through their first 3 playoff games. And these 3 playoff games were against Shane Bieber, AL Cy Young winner-to-be, Carlos Carrasco, who finished with a great season, like top 10 in the AL and ERA, and Blake Snell. So not exactly slouches, and the Yankees just teed off against them in the first 3 games here. So there may just be no stopping this Yankees offense at this point. Eventually they're going to slow. I mean, they're not going to keep up this pace, but it's hard. I mean, great pitching against them in the wild card round, and the Indians. Great pitching is certainly on the Rays, but it hasn't mattered yet. Another takeaway, Randy Arozarena is the real deal, and that's a name, not exactly a household name. He homered off of, as I mentioned a minute ago, Garrett Cole last night. Far from a household name, but the former Cardinals prospect was actually one of the hottest hitters in baseball in September after getting called up. He hit 7 home runs in the month with an OPS over 1,000. His home run last night against Cole left the bat over 107 miles an hour. Then he added singles in the 4th inning, and then again in the 5th inning, and then he lined out in his final at-bat at 112 miles an hour. He's locked in at the plate right now, and again, not a household name you probably heard much, but Randy Arozarena, a big part of that Rays offense right now, a player that Yankees pitchers really need to watch out for, and someone who could be crucial for the Rays if they're gonna, get that offense going enough to compete against the Yankees and what they have. My prediction for this series is also, this was a tough one. I'm not even sure, honestly, what my pick would have been coming into the series if it would have been any different than what I'm going to say now. But my prediction, I'm going Yankees in 5. I mean, the Rays are a really tough team. There's no way, I should rephrase that. I really think this series is probably going to go 5 games. Because neither team is neither team's just going to let this fall apart on them. And I think with the Yankees offense doing what it is, the Rays are a more well-rounded team. But in the postseason, we've seen so far, it's looking like the higher powered offense. That one's winning out, and the Yankees certainly have that. I may pick the Rays to post a better record if we were starting a 162-game season with these rosters today, just because of their well-rounded nature. But in a series like this, the Yankees with an early 1-0 lead in the series, I'm going with the Yankees to take this series, the ALDS, in 5 games. There are certainly questions for the Yankees, including their pitching. They're going to send, we'll talk about it in a minute, they're going to send a rookie to the mound in Game 2 today, and then it starts to get a little messy, Masahiro Tanaka, and then from there on out, it's kind of like, it's a little dicey from the pitching perspective for the Yankees. But I'm going with the Yankees in 5 in this series. All right, we're going to go ahead and take our first break of the show. When we come back, we will go through some news and notes, some big headlines from the last couple of days and from the weekend. And then after that, we'll dive into the NLDS. 2 matchups, 2 series set to get underway here today. Marlins, Braves, and Padres, Dodgers. So we'll discuss that, preview that. I'll give you my predictions for those series and much more coming up next here on ATB Live from 110 Sports. All right, welcome back to Around the Bases from 110 Sports here, live streaming on the 110 Sports Network at 110sportsmedia.com, twitch.tv/110sports, and available here on demand on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and on the website. So we're going to get to the NL side of the division series matchups coming up here in just a moment, I should say. But first, we're going to go through some news and notes, some big headlines from the last couple of days, and we are going to start with this sad news. Another giant in baseball history has passed away as Hall of Fame right-hander Bob Gibson, the greatest pitcher in St. Louis Cardinals history, and one of the most dominating and intimidating pitchers in MLB history, who transformed the game, died on Friday at the age of 84 in his hometown of Omaha, Nebraska, after battling pancreatic cancer. Gibson's death came on the 52nd anniversary of one of the best pitching performances in MLB postseason history, when he struck out a World Series record 17 batters in Game 1 of the 1968 World Series against the Tigers. The Cardinals came up short of the World Series title that year, but Gibson's historically dominant season as the face of the so-called Year of the Pitcher led the league to change the rules out of a fear of a repeat. That season in 1968, Gibson started 34 games, completing 28 of them, throwing just over 300 innings, posting a MLB modern record 1.12 ERA. And earning All-Star, Cy Young, MVP, and Gold Glove honors. Gibson was the youngest of 7 children and also a skilled basketball player, becoming the first black player to receive a basketball scholarship to Creighton, and eventually becoming the school's all-time points per game leader, before eventually briefly playing for the Harlem Globetrotters. He eventually signed with the Cardinals, though, and that's where he played his entire 17-year career. At his peak, Gibson may have been the most talented all-around starter in MLB history. He captured 9 consecutive Gold Gloves, 2 Cy Young Awards, was a 9-time All-Star, and the greatest postseason pitcher post-World War II. In 9 postseason series, all of them in the World Series, Gibson threw 8 complete games and 2 shutouts. He pitched in the World Series in 3 separate years, 2 of those times he was named World Series MVP, and the other time was in 1968 when he struck out 17 batters in one game and posted a 1.67 ERA for the series in 3 outings. In terms of most strikeouts in a single postseason series, Gibson, he's first on the list with 35 in the 1968 World Series. He's also second on the list with 31 in the 1964 World Series. He's also tied for 5th as well. Gibson is the Cardinals' all-time franchise leader in wins, strikeouts, shutouts, games started, and complete games. He also twice hit 5 home runs in a single season. Not allowed 5 home runs, hit 5 home runs in a single season. And he batted .303 in 1970, the year he captured his 2nd Cy Young Award. One final incredible statistic on Bob Gibson from Stats Inc. In the past 40 seasons, there have been no players who have done a single one of the following things in Major League Baseball. Nobody's pitched 300 or more innings. Nobody's had a sub-150 ERA. And nobody's thrown 25-plus complete games. Bob Gibson did all 3 in 1968. That's how incredible. I mean, it's hard to even put into words how historic, how dominant, how incredible, and how game-changing that 1968 season from Gibson was. As Major League Baseball the next year lowered the mound as a result of that year the pitcher that he was the face of. As mentioned, in addition to his dominance, Gibson was also a fierce competitor, known for his intense competitive drive and his trademark stare from the mound. Hank Aaron once told his teammate Dusty Baker, quote, "Don't dig in against Bob Gibson. He'll knock you down." He'd knock down his own grandmother if she dared to challenge him. In the 1968 season, 13 of Gibson's 22 wins were shutouts, leading his catcher, Tim McCarver, to call him the luckiest pitcher I ever saw. He always pitches when the other team doesn't score any runs. Gibson was elected into the National Baseball Hall of Fame in 1981. The Cardinals retired his uniform number, and he spent some time as a pitching coach before later working in broadcasting. He remained around the Cardinals organization in his later years, for decades and into his later years, and he was actually a mentor to Cardinals' young ace Jack Flaherty, offering advice which helped Flaherty turn around an inconsistent first half last year into a historically dominant second half run. Gibson's death comes less than a month after the death of his longtime teammate, Hall of Fame outfielder Lou Brock. Another great from the era pitcher Tom Seaver passed away in late August. Bob Gibson was 84 years old. Some other headlines for you now, taking a turn to some injury updates. Houston Astros starter and 2-time Cy Young winner Justin Verlander underwent Tommy John surgery as expected this past Wednesday. The recovery time for him is 12 to 14 months, meaning Verlander will not pitch again until the 2022 season. At that point, he'll be 39 years old, and his current contract with the Astros will have ended. He'll attempt to become just the 10th known pitcher in MLB history to come back after having Tommy John surgery at age 37 or older. While the odds are certainly against Verlander returning to his previous dominant form, it's certainly not wise to bet against Justin Verlander, who in recent years, as he aged into his mid to late 30s, he just kept getting better, to the point of winning the AL Cy Young Award in 2019 in his age 36 season with a 21-6 record and 300 strikeouts. Another headline for you here, Phillies general manager Matt Klentak has stepped down. The Phillies announcing that news on Saturday. Assistant GM Ned Rice will take over on an interim basis while the team conducts a search for a new general manager. Klentak was hired in 2015, and he was at the helm when the team signed Bryce Harper to that $330 million contract. Also when the team traded pitching prospect Sixto Sanchez and catcher Jorge Alfaro to the Marlins for JT Realmuto. Other notable acquisitions during his tenure, Jake Arrieta, Andrew McCutchen, and D.D. Gregorius. Despite those and other high-profile moves and high expectations, the Phillies did not make the playoffs during his tenure. the organization's 9-year playoff drought, now the longest in the National League, with the Marlins making the postseason. In a statement, Phillies managing partner John Middleton saying, "I have stated publicly that winning is what matters, not just in Philadelphia, but in all cities and in all sports. While Matt made many significant contributions to the organization, we did not accomplish our goal of playing baseball in October. Consequently, we have mutually agreed to allow new leadership to head baseball operations. Klentak will remain in the Phillies organization in another position." Sticking with the Phillies, their first baseman Rhys Hoskins underwent surgery on his non-throwing elbow back on Friday, and he'll be sidelined for the next 4 to 6 months. The procedure was not Tommy John surgery, but rather what's called an internal brace repair for his UCL, according to NBC Sports Philadelphia. And that's good news in terms of recovery time. Tommy John surgery usually sidelines position players about 8 months or so, though Hoskins could miss a little bit of time at the beginning of next season. It looks like it would only be a little bit of time at most. The 27-year-old hit 10 home runs in 41 games this season. And a couple of quick hit items for you here. Veteran catcher Francisco Cervelli announced his retirement from Major League Baseball on Sunday. The 34-year-old spent 13 seasons in the majors with the Yankees, Pirates, Braves, and Marlins. He was part of the Yankees World Series winning team in 2009. He was still productive at the plate in recent years, but battled concussion issues, and Cervelli retiring from Major League Baseball. He batted .268 with 41 home runs in his career. An interesting story to monitor here: the U.S. Supreme Court is allowing a class action lawsuit to proceed from minor league baseball players who alleged that they have been paid less than the minimum wage. The Supreme Court denying Major League Baseball's request to take the case, which will return to the trial court soon. The lawsuit involving minor leaguers from Arizona, California, and Florida who first sued MLB teams back in February of 2014. So that is our news and notes for today, and that's certainly an item to keep an eye on moving forward. We're going to go ahead and dive now, as promised, into the National League side of the bracket, into the 2 NLDS series, and we're going to start with the Marlins and the Braves. And as we go through these series, an important note that none of these NL wildcard series had been completed prior to our show on Thursday. So we're going to discuss, as we did with the AL teams, a little bit with regard to how they got there. So Marlins and Braves, the first matchup I want to talk about, Minute Maid Park, Texas, Minute Maid Park in Houston, Texas, Game 1. This afternoon. It's coming up in actually just about half an hour from now, 2:08 Eastern. Max Fried versus Sandy Alcantara in that game. A little bit about how these teams got there. The Marlins, we know it's well documented their journey to the postseason, outperforming low expectations and overcoming a massive COVID-19 outbreak that forced them to scramble to fill out roster spots. And despite a run differential that's negative 41 for the regular season, the Marlins posted an above 500 record for the first time in 11 years, finished second in the NL East standings, and matched up against the Cubs, who their offense could not get anything going. The Marlins held a completely lost Cubs lineup to just a single run on 9 total hits in a surprise 2-game sweep for Miami. Homers from veterans Corey Dickerson, Jesus Aguilar, and Garrett Cooper making the difference. Sandy Alcantara, Sixto Sanchez, we actually mentioned just a minute ago, involved in that Realmuto deal, both impressed in their playoff debuts. The Marlins improved to a remarkable 7-0 in postseason series in franchise history. No team is anywhere close. The Marlins still have not lost a postseason series. And that's how they got there. Certainly a disappointing ending for the Cubs. That offense we know there's great players in there, but absolutely punchless for a lot of the season, particularly down the stretch and in this series against the Marlins, who advanced to take on the Braves, who finished on top of the NL East for the 3rd straight season. The big storyline heading into their series against the Reds was the Braves' offense against the Reds' elite trio of starters, and we didn't even get to see the trio of Red starters, all 3 of them, because the Braves pitching ended up being the hero, and the Braves swept that series 2-0. Max Fried threw 7 shutout innings in Game 1. Ian Anderson struck out 9 in Game 2. The Reds couldn't score a single run. They became the first team in MLB history to be eliminated from a postseason series without scoring a run. I should actually not even a postseason series. They just became the first team in MLB history, period, to be eliminated without scoring a run, excluding single wildcard games. So the Braves got enough offense. The pitching was great. The Reds were shut down. That offense has struggled all year, and they were a big pick of many people. The Reds were to make a deep run, but the offense couldn't get anything going, and we have Marlins Braves in the NLDS. The Braves took this series 6-4. Of course, you'll remember one of those games was a 29-9 Atlanta victory over Miami back on September 9th. And a couple of key storylines I think you should know heading into this series. For the Marlins pitching, they're going to look to keep their success going because the odds of Miami out-hitting the Braves in this series are very, very, very slim. So Miami's most probable path to victory would be on the arms of their several young, exciting, promising pitchers like Alcantara, like Sixto Sanchez, like Pablo Lopez, who's going to get the ball in Game 2, who posted a 3.61 ERA this season. They're going to need to limit an offense in the Braves that posted the highest OPS in the majors this year. It's a tall task for some young pitchers, but that's going to be the Marlins' real path to victory here. It's certainly not one that many people are predicting, but if the Marlins were to win, it's going to be by limiting the Braves offense just enough and getting just enough offensive contributions from some of their veteran hitters. For the Braves, an interesting storyline here is the rotation depth behind their top two options. We saw Ian Anderson and Max Fried, as I talked about, do some incredible things in their series against the Reds, but in a best of 5 and then moving forward, we're going to have to, of course, see more than just 2 Braves starters. Mike Soroka out for the season after tearing his Achilles early in the regular season. Cole Hamels done for the season due to shoulder fatigue. And the Braves' rotation, as a result, behind those 2 guys is a question. Kyle Wright is set to get the ball in Game 3. He posted a 5.21 ERA this year. So that kind of speaks for itself. And afterwards, after those top 3, if it goes to a Game 4, it's unclear who would get the ball in that game for Atlanta. So certainly not a perfect team when it comes to a pitching perspective. There's certainly some questions. The Braves have a good bullpen. They're going to need to rely on that. But if Max Fried or Ian Anderson or both of them struggle or can't go deep in the first couple games, and then you've got so many questions afterwards, that could be trouble for the Braves in that series. So that's something I'm looking for. The other one here, other storyline, is the status of Starling Marte, and we actually just got some new information on this a few minutes ago. The veteran outfielder was acquired from the Diamondbacks at the trade deadline, the Marlins' best all-around hitter, but he suffered a fracture in his hand after being hit by a pitch in Game 1 against the Cubs, and we just learned a little bit ago now that he was left off of the team's NLDS roster. He is on the taxi squad. Magnera Sierra will be starting in center field for the Marlins in Game 1 today, and that is certainly a big loss for Miami. Don Mattingly telling, according to the Miami Herald, Don Mattingly saying, obviously a guy you don't want to leave off your roster, but we weren't comfortable with what he was going to be able to do. So it sounded like maybe a situation where Marte could maybe run the bases, maybe field but not hit, and the Marlins deciding that just wasn't enough to include him on their NLDS roster. The Marlins, without Marte, they're going to need some veterans like Jesus Aguilar, Garrett Cooper, Brian Anderson, Miguel Rojas to keep stepping up for them offensively. Otherwise, offense is going to have to come from somewhere for them. Otherwise, they don't have much of a fighting chance, because even in a best case scenario, I can't see Marlins pitchers, shutting out the Braves with real consistency. So they're going to need some offensive contributions from some of the veterans on that roster. My prediction for this series is Braves in 4. I think the Marlins will be able to steal a game here, but I think their run's going to end. I think they're finally going to lose a postseason series. I think the Braves are too good offensively. It's not a perfect scenario. The Braves are not a perfect team, but I'm not going to go with the upset here. I'm going Braves, and I'm going Braves in 4 in this series. I think the Marlins will steal one game, but other than that, I think it is Atlanta in this series. other NLDS matchup to discuss is Padres-Dodgers, and we just have some new information on this, so we're going to go through that here in just a minute. I'm going to check to make sure we've got the latest here. Okay, so we've got Dodgers and Padres. That's this one at Globe Life Field in Arlington, Texas. Game 1 is tonight at 9:30 Eastern. Walker Buehler will be on the mound for the Dodgers in Game 1 opposite Mike Clevenger, who we just learned within the last couple of minutes now that Clevenger will be on the Padres NLDS roster, and he will start Game 1 for the Dodgers tonight. So we're going to talk about that more in just a moment, but that is the big news just coming in. A little bit of background for you because, again, we didn't get to talk about these two teams in terms of wrapping up their wild card series. The Padres, their rise, of course, is well documented from being a mediocre to bad team for several years now to now the second best record in the NL this season, their first postseason berth in 16 years, one of the most exciting teams in baseball this season, and it looked like their great run could come to an abrupt end in the wild card series. The Cardinals took Game 1 and had an early lead in Game 2, and the team was without Dinelson Lamet and Mike Clevenger, both out with arm injuries, but San Diego's offense, that deep offense, powered them to victories in Games 2 and Game 3. In Game 3, the Padres shutting out St. Louis with 9 pitchers. Fernando Tatis Jr. and Will Myers became the second pair of teammates in postseason history to both hit 2 homers in the same game. The Padres offense came through for them, and they advanced to the NLDS against a much tougher Dodgers team. The Dodgers, meanwhile, we've talked about it, you know it, indisputably the best team in baseball this year, never lost more than 2 games in a row, led the baseball in runs scored and ERA. They had the 1 seed. They faced the Brewers, who barely snuck into the playoff field, below 500. Predictably, the Dodgers starters, Buehler, Kershaw, helped keep a pretty bad Milwaukee offense in check. The Dodgers swept the series with relative ease. In that one, Mookie Betts had 3 doubles in that series. So here we are, Padres, Dodgers. Dodgers taking the season series in the regular season 6-4, but the Padres certainly play them about as tough as anyone. And some key storylines heading into this series, like I mentioned, the Lamet-Clevenger question for the Padres. Those are their 2 top pitchers, and they were able to get past the Cardinals. Barely. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say barely, both, based on some final scores, but it certainly looked like it was trending toward them losing that series. They were able to get past the Cardinals, but I thought the chances of them being able to get past the Dodgers with those 2 guys out was pretty darn slim. And we just received word here within this during the time of this broadcast, just a few minutes ago, I checked it in a break. We have word that, again, Mike Clevenger on the Padres roster will start Game 1 tonight. He hasn't pitched since September 23rd due to an elbow strain, but he has made it through some recent throwing sessions with no problems. It's unclear how long the Padres would stick with him, if he might be on some sort of a pitch count tonight. Clevenger posted a 2.84 ERA in 4 starts after being acquired, of course, by the Indians at the trade deadline before going down with injury. So that's certainly a big addition for the Padres. A huge addition, especially if he can give them a good outing here in Game 1. If he's able to give them a great outing and the Padres take Game 1, that could certainly, of course, be a difference maker. But it was a mixed bag in terms of updates for those 2 guys, because we also have learned here just in the last couple minutes that Dinelson Lamet is not on the Padres NLDS roster. He's been dealing with biceps tightness. He just resumed playing catch. He was checked out by an elbow specialist over the weekend, but he's playing catch now, which is a good sign that, it's nothing too serious, but Lamet left off the roster. So a mixed bag there. You have to think the Padres are going to need something big from Clevenger and some of their other starters, Chris Paddock, to turn it around after a bad wild card series start for them to have much of a chance against this Dodgers team. Couple of other key storylines to discuss here briefly. These are 2 teams in very different spots. You have the Dodgers, who have really been the best team in the National League in the last decade. If you look collectively, they've been the team to beat in the National League. They've been They've won 8 straight consecutive NL West titles, and they still don't have that World Series yet. They haven't won one. I mean, not they've won one before, of course, but they're still looking for their first World Series title since 1988. So there's a lot of pressure on the Dodgers. And then you've got the Padres, I should say, who don't have that same, who are in a very different situation. They lack that postseason experience. They just broke the second longest playoff drought in the National League. And, they've got just this fun, loose team that there's just not the same pressure. Not that there's not motivation for them to get what they called, go get that big cake, is what they described it as. The team has described it as. But it's a different type of motivation, different type of pressure, I feel like, for those two teams. It's kind of World Series or bust for the Dodgers. And then the Padres season, I mean, it's a success regardless of if they don't win another single game. Now, I'm sure that's not how the players are thinking, but it's just the Dodgers are probably playing, there's this idea that the Padres are playing a little bit more loose, and you've got the Dodgers who have this sort of pressure on them, and it's just something to consider going into this series. Finally, this final thing I want to say, there's just so much star power in this series. There's no great, point about what that means, but this is a series you're not going to want to miss games from because you've got the most exciting young player in the majors in Fernando Tatis, another NL MVP candidate in Machado on that infield, and then an NL Rookie of the Year candidate, and Jake Cronenworth at second base. The Dodgers have, 2 of the last 2 years' worth of MVPs. I mean, they have Mookie Betts, Cody Bellinger. I mean, we know how great they can be. Bellinger winning NL MVP last year, Betts AL MVP in 2018. They've got their star shortstop Corey Seager, Clayton Kershaw pitching like a Cy Young contender again. So there's so much star power in this series. This could easily be the most fun series of the postseason, so you're not going to want to miss any of this series. Finally, my prediction for this one, I'm going Dodgers in 5. I have to go with the Dodgers here. Actually, I don't have to go with the Dodgers. I could go with the Padres. They're a very skilled team, particularly a deep offense. But even with Clevenger back, with questions about, how long is he going to go and how fresh is he going to be, and Lamette's not there, and the pitching just doesn't quite measure up for the Padres, and there's questions. I can't pick against the Dodgers. I think they get it done, but I think it goes all the way to a Game 5. So my prediction, Dodgers in 5 in that series. So again, my division series predictions, on the AL side, I'm going A's in 5 over the Astros, Yankees in 5 over the Rays, Braves in 4 over the Marlins, and finally Dodgers in 5 over the Padres. So we're going to go ahead and take our final break of the show. When we come back, what's on deck? We'll get you set up for the schedule for today's games, for tomorrow's games, and I'll give you my new prediction for our AL champion. With the Twins eliminated, I'll tell you who I'm picking to win the AL now, a revised prediction, if you will. That's coming up next here as we round out this Tuesday show here on Around the Bases from 110 Sports. All right, welcome back to our final segment of Around the Bases here on this Tuesday, October 6th. I'm Chris Brown. It's time for What's on Deck, our preview segment, as we always do, of what you can expect coming up in the next couple of days or so in the baseball world. And we're going to be pretty focused on, I'll tell you in a minute about the matchups, particularly the matchups that are on schedule. Let me rephrase that. The matchups that are in line for today, your starting pitching matchups and what you can expect schedule-wise tomorrow as well. But before I do that, I want to start with a revised prediction, if you will, for our AL champion. The Twins, of course, if you remember, were my pick to win the ALCS title, and that's obviously not going to happen. That pick just didn't work out. I guess I learned my lesson not to pick the Twins to win a postseason series until they show they can win a postseason game again. I mean, it's a little harsh, but that's kind of the situation that we're at now. So the Twins are out. So I'm going to pick a new team to make the World Series from the AL side, and I realize that I'm not revise my prediction. I don't expect credit if it happens on the level of if I had picked it early before the postseason began. But I'm going with the Yankees to be that team that faces off against, in my pick being the Dodgers in the World Series. I'm going with the Yankees. I think whoever wins that Yankees-Rays series is going to be the AL's representative in the World Series. I think both teams are better than the Astros or the A's. So I think the Yankees-Rays, whoever wins that series, is going to beat the Houston-Oakland winner and go to the World Series. And my pick for that Yankees-Rays series is the Yankees. So in simple terms, I'm picking the Yankees now. That offense just doesn't look like it can be stopped. Garrett Cole, I think, is just going to continue to be pretty dominant the rest of the way in any postseason starts he makes. So I'm going with the Yankees to go to the World Series to face the Dodgers. I'm not revising my World Series pick. I'm sticking with the Dodgers, though, for that one. As for the scoreboard today, as for the schedule for today, we have a game, as mentioned, coming up right away here after the show. Marlins Braves. They are in warm-up now. That game's scheduled to begin in just about 10 minutes. Sandy Alcantara, Max Fried in that one. Then later on this afternoon, 4:30 Eastern, we have Framber Valdez against Sean Manaea, Astros and the A's. Later this evening, two games starting around 8, 9 o'clock. We have first Yankees-Rays. Game 2, the Yankees will be sending a rookie. 21-year-old Delvin Garcia will become the youngest Yankee pitcher to make a postseason start. He will start opposite of Tyler Glasnow, who has been one of the Rays' best pitchers this year. And then the final game, a 9:30-ish start, it's Padres-Dodgers, and again, we just learned it'll be Mike Clevenger on the mound for the Padres tonight, opposite Walker Buehler. And there's a very good chance that neither of those starters goes very deep. Buehler has been dealing with a blister situation, which has sort of limited him from being able to go super deep in games. And Clevenger, of course, hasn't pitched in a few weeks at least. So you have to think that neither is going to go super deep into this game. So we could have another offensive explosion on our hands tonight. It's going to probably come down to the bullpens in that game in NLDS Game 1. And then we've also got a full slate of games on the schedule for tomorrow. Teams basically sticking to their same time slots. So Marlins Braves, the first game around 2 Eastern. A's Astros, 3:30 Eastern. Rays Yankees, 7 Eastern. And Padres Dodgers, that one's at 9 Eastern tomorrow. And then, assuming we don't have a ALDS sweep, there will be 4 games again on the schedule on Thursday as well. The first one would be NLDS Game 3, again, Braves-Marlins, early afternoon. So we're going to have plenty to talk about. 8 games are going to be played between now and when we come on the air again with Around the Bases on Thursday. So we will have plenty to discuss on that show as well, of course. But that's going to do it for today's edition of Around the Bases from 110 Sports. A couple of reminders as we head out. Our live coverage continues with the J-Mole Show with Josh Mullenix tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern, and then with Touchline Talk with Josh Doring at 11 a.m. Eastern on Thursday. And then, as mentioned, 1 p.m. Eastern, same place, same time of day, 1 p.m. Eastern, Around the Bases, back with you on Thursday discussing those 8 playoff games, getting you updated We could have potentially by that point, if there's an ALDS sweep, we may have a team heading to the ALCS at that point. I'm doubtful of that, but it's certainly possible. And make sure to go to 110sportsmedia.com for the latest written content. Subscribe to our newsletter as well. But that's going to do it for today's broadcast. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, and I will talk to you again on Thursday.